Hello and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Arbo's most besieged work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Duress, I almost called it Besieged, Duress 12.x, an interlude. And that interlude is of our good fiancé, Alistair. And we start back in time, as all history's interludes start, with Alistair as a younger boy in high school, looking at the exam placed in front of him and preparing to skip it.
Just the second I saw this was an Alister interlude, I was like, it's perfect. Like, I should have seen it coming. Maybe it's just like a 2020 hindsight thing, but Alistair has just been set up to be, you know, a big cog in the machine over the next arc at least. Yeah. And like, even if you didn't suspect he was part of the Rose Amon, you know, wheel-breaking fantasy tour, there's still so much to dive into just on the Baheims in general. It's like, of course, a Baheim interlude focusing on Alistair is so perfect here.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't see it coming.
Me neither. I thought it was a pretty obvious pick, but it's fine. More of a surprise for you. Yeah, it does feel like the Baheims have always needed more interludes. Ever since we got Amon's interlude and we kind of were like, okay, there's more stuff going on here. We just haven't had the chance to properly explore it.
No, and we've gotten so many mixed signals from Laird since then about, like, is he part of this? Is he not part of this?
Yeah.
And, like, you know, is it grey? And it turns out the answer is kinda. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his vibe in this chapter gives off is like, yeah, I'm kind of part of this, but we'll see.
Yeah,
no, it's an awesome interlude choice. And right immediately from the start of this interlude, the character trait that immediately strikes you about Alistair is how smug and cocksure he is, right? Like, he's such a Baheim.
Yeah, he just comes across as so arrogant very early on.
Yeah, which is the main thing you need to be the leader of the Baheim house.
Yeah, I mean, he looks down on almost everyone and everything through his narration.
Yeah.
I actually really like this as well because it really makes it hit home when we meet Rose Senior later in the chapter, because he's just like sort of straight up terrified and belittled by her presence.
Yeah,
you
true.
really get a sense of how fantastically powerful she is.
Yeah, you have to be pretty strong to stop a Baheim from being a smartass.
Yeah, it reminds me of that one time we saw the cracks in Laird, which was when Blake had him, you know, in all the circles with Pose in the middle of the circles. And I saw the one time Laird just was straight up like, I can't
do this.
With this. Yeah.
Yeah. Which means, of course, Blake and Rose have hit that same point of being that scary, I guess.
Yeah.
So Alistair takes out his pocket watch and kind of uses it to skip through the test, basically skipping through this entire class, actually, and simultaneously banking away some time.
Yeah, and it's kind of curious when it first happens, because, like, for me, it was a bit of a bait and switch. Like, I was tricked, because I assumed he was, like, going to use it to slow time or cheat on the test, and, like, oh, he's going to waste power because Ainsley makes out it's so bad, and then it turns out he's skipping, but he still filled out the test. So then you're sort of like, okay, so why is this bad? Because that seems amazing.
Yeah, I kind of have the same reaction of you kind of figure it out, and you're like, well, Ainsley, why do you feel like this is so bad? And then, of course, it's because she has more genuine adult concerns than the kind of childish concerns of, well, he's cheating on his test. It's actually a bit more like something really dodgy is going on here, and I need to kind of figure out why.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're 12 arcs into Pact. We all know that it's not just like a good thing. We know that he's not going to get that for free in this world.
Yeah.
So you're sort of left trying to piece together what is bad about it, because on the surface, it's like, geez, I'd do it.
Yeah. I know this is kind of a stupid reaction to have, but my first reaction was, man, this is so reckless. And like, yeah, duh, you know, but it's like, it feels like it's such a, I don't know, like it seems like he almost doesn't even, so he knows he's filled out the test, but he doesn't really remember it. And so it feels like he's not actually gaining the knowledge. It feels like a very reckless way to treat your education, Alistair. So pick up your boots.
Well, I mean, it's basically like click rules, like from the movie Click. Is that a dumb maybe
I
nobody
mean, I
else
haven't
has
seen it, so maybe it's a
Okay.
perfect analogy. I don't know.
Okay, never mind. But I love this metaphor that's sort of set up because I think like we've known that the Behames donate time for a little while now.
Yeah.
But this is our first understanding of what that like explicitly means.
Yeah.
And what I do like is it's established here that the kids have to give up less than the adults. So it's like, obviously this whole thing is just this metaphor for giving up some of your life for the family and the circle.
Mm.
And I do like the nice little touch that's like, okay, the kids have to give up some of their childhood, but not as much. The Behames aren't complete monsters. They do understand, the kids need to have a childhood of some sort. I mean, maybe it's just the practical, like, oh, they need to be educated or something. But I'd like to think part of it is that they understand that, childhood is important. So, not completely the worst.
Yeah, well, this is one of the strongest recurring beats of characterization for the Behames, right? And I think to a lesser extent the Duchamps, but still the Duchamps, is that they've kind of trapped themselves in this system because of their care for their families, right?
Mm-hmm.
They absolutely love and want to protect their family, and the best way they know how to do that is by perpetuating this familial system, which is short-term gains, long-term pains. But yeah, it is a nice, like, it fits very well that this is kind of the part of how the system works when you're a child.
Yeah, it's a bit nice.
Yeah. So it just occurred to me something during this interlude, which is Alistair's name is literally spelled A-lister, like he's an A-lister, like he's some kind of celebrity, and that probably explains why he's so arrogant. It's probably like nominative determinism.
I hate you so much. I can't unsee that. Like the whole rest of my notes from this point on, I was thinking A-lister in my head as I typed Alistair, and I hate you for it.
Yeah. No. Well, blame Wildbow. It's his stupid pun, I'm assuming.
If that was on purpose, Wildbow, then you're on my enemy list too.
Yeah. So A-lister talks to his, in air quotes, friend.
I hate
you. Basically to try and avoid having to be confronted by Ainsley. And it doesn't work. But this is fun because he literally...
he stalls for time.
Yeah, and his friend is introduced. He just says Dick, and I don't know your reaction, but my reaction when I was reading this is, what? And then it becomes immediately obvious after 2 sentences or so that he's referring to his friend.
Yeah.
It's his friend's name is Dick. He's not just referring to his friend as a dick. But I thought it was just a great way of introducing the way that he sees his friend. Because it is kind of on that level, right?
No, I completely agree. I love that interpretation. That's just, that's exactly how he thinks of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also like the bit where they have a brief chat and it's sort of like, they talk about how the test went and Alistair's like, yep, I think it went pretty well. Basically sort of saying, I think I kind of nailed it. And Dick is like, well, yeah, but you always say that and you've been wrong. And it's just, another little beat of Alistair's confidence. Like he has no idea in any of these tests. Presumably he's been skipping all these tests. He has absolutely no idea how he went. But his default assumption is that he probably nailed it.
Yeah.
Regardless of the reality.
Yeah, exactly. He just assumes like, well, I don't remember it, but it was probably fine because I'm a genius. And,
yeah, exactly.
And to his credit, that does seem to be the case more often than not. So
yeah, I hate it.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than someone so smug than when they're actually justified.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to read out this paragraph. I basically loved the whole interaction between Alister and Dick, but I'm just going to read out a specific portion of it. Alistair's smile was cold and humorless. It clearly made Dick uncomfortable. What do you think? I don't know, Dick said. We were just joking around. So did you have a guess? Nah, Dick lied, shrugging. So I love this interaction because it so immediately sets up how above it all Alistair feels. Like, he clearly doesn't care about his non-practitioner relationships. He only barely cares about his actual practitioner relationships. And when Dick says nah, even in Alistair's internal monologue, he refers to it as Dick lied, it as if he's omniscient. It's creepy and it's detached and it's smug and it's very Behame.
Yeah, I mean, I came away from this with this sort of feeling that I don't want to use the term sociopath. I feel like that's overused. I think the book has even called that to our attention. But he does feel like someone who doesn't have friends. He has tools.
Yeah.
And I think Dick, he surrounded himself with people who I think he feels like he can predict even without his implement.
Yeah.
He just likes to be in control, basically. And I think he's sort of he's picked friends that he can see himself being above and controlling to some extent.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm jumping in a bit early, but obviously something that comes up a fair few times in this chapter is him and Ainsley's sort of relationship. And, he's forced to forgive her later. And he's sort of logicking out as to why he should is, well, I guess she has had my back in the past. But, all of them have kind of, because they're all family, and that's just that's my expectation of family.
Yeah.
She's just had it more because she's closer to my age, so she's had more opportunities. Like, there's no sense of affection. It's just kind of like, yes, she has been a useful tool and may continue to do so.
It's a fun beat, isn't it? Because he has to talk himself into forgiving her, and he genuinely, does. But the way he does that is by kind of logically convincing himself that she's a useful minion, and that's the reason he should forgive her.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, he's going to make a great husband.
Yeah. So Ainsley starts asking what Alistair's up to, and eventually she kind of needles it out of him that he is donating much, much more time than he needs to, but he refuses to say why.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where you're like, doesn't that sounds good? Why is that not good?
Yeah.
I think that's sort of what really drives this first chunk of the chapter is you being like, I don't understand why these things are bad, but I believe everyone when they say that they are. But especially again to come back to Ainsley versus Alister, like Ainsley's sort of framed by Alister as this person who kind of has potential, but just is following the rules, and she's just a pedestrian. She does what her parents tell her, and they're ruining her lives. Whereas he's this great person that sort of sees control, and he figures out the system and bends it to his whim, kind of like, he's one of those people who's like, oh, well, the rules don't apply to me because I'm better than them. And I hate those people.
Yeah.
But, I think it's important that this is Ainsley, we've already touched on where this ends up, but this is another Bahame. Like, he even has this superiority complex within his family. And I think that just really shows how elevated he thinks he is, that even amongst all the other smug Bahames, he's the smuggest.
He's the Bahamist, yeah. Yeah. His relationship with Ainsley is interesting because she is like, seems to be characterized, at least so far, and we haven't dove that deep into her character, but she seems to be the kind of Bahame who is, and this is kind of a bit of a horrible thing to say, but a bit of the cattle, right? She's there to feed into the system, and she's never really going to rock the boat. She's never going to expend that much energy. She's there to be, one of the peons.
I think she might have actually been the one Blake told she was cattle, and she was like, "Are you calling me a cow?"
Yeah.
And Blake's like, "Well, yeah, kinda."
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think that holds. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important to point out that Alistair seems to share that view.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he at least to his credit though, he doesn't. And he talks about this with Laird. It's not that he's thinking, "Oh, I deserve all the power." It's like he just thinks he's the best one to be in charge of it. It's exactly what we've talked about in the Bahames and their goals in this whole war. Is they're kind of like, we don't really have any super concrete plans or anything. We just know that we're the best people to do it.
Yeah,
and that's Alistair's thing here. He doesn't like think she's a complete waste or anything. He just trusts himself to manage her power better than her.
Yeah, and manage her power for her and for the other Bahames.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny that this guy has become part of the plan to break the wheel, because he just seems like everything that's wrong with the system in a way, like this sort of greedy power hungriness that sort of a lot of practitioners can show.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like he likes the system existing, not for him, because he doesn't really abide by it, but for other people, right? The system is there to, help him manage the other people without having to put in so much effort to it.
Well, yeah, and he is completely okay with abusing the system to empower himself, which is like everything that's wrong with practitioners right now is how selfish and self-serving they are.
Yeah. So there's this one line where where Alistair notices that Ainsley's holding her own pocket watch, and he thinks hers had a proper chain and wasn't quite as beat up, which is interesting because it sets up, or it seemed to set up to me at least, that Alistair wasn't as like in the family as Ainsley is. Ainsley is the proper Bahame, and Alistair is a bit of the outside horse.
Yeah, no, I totally got that, because he describes his own pocket watch a bit earlier in this and talks about how it's all dented and broken. And then it's not long after that we get this, so your mind immediately sort of leaps to comparing those two. And I agree, it immediately sets up this idea of there being a natural hierarchy that Alistair explains later, and that Ainsley's higher up on it. I also think, as a metaphor, it's kind of doing a second thing, because Alistair also mentions about that some of the dents and broken bits are his fault. So I like this as an idea of, he sees himself as someone who gets this broken thing and kind of wears it down even further, but to use it, his is getting a bit more broken up because he's using it so much more, and it's not just that he's getting worse tools, but he's making more with them, and that's why he's so much more special.
Maybe even you could extend this just to apply to his minions, right? And I'm just going to call them that. The fact that he doesn't have a high regard for the welfare of his tools. I mean, it's a little, I think, shallow to make that comparison, because the pocket watch is, as far as we know, an inanimate object. It could have some greater sentience, but...
No, you're right. I like that. I like that better. Yeah.
We'll see, I suppose, whether he treats the other Bahames when he's in charge as badly as he treats his other tools to be used.
Yeah, you're right. But if a tool gets a bit injured, but it's serving its purpose, he's sort of okay with that, I think. It was a bit of an implication there, and I like the thought that might extend to the rest of them.
Yeah. So we jump forward in time, and now Laird is also in the conversation. He's been called in by Ainsley. And Laird is there basically trying to understand what he's doing.
I love this cut, like in the text, the way it's sort of Ainsley's just going, why? And then we get one of those section breaks that immediately jumps to Laird being like, why?
Yeah.
And it's like such a great way to just instantly transition into this new scene and just bring Laird into the conversation we were already having. Like, it's such a nice, clean cut to move everything forward, but also not break the momentum of what we're doing at all. Yeah,
no, it's nice, isn't it? The momentum really flows, and Laird kind of immediately takes over this conversation, right? But he's actually more endearing here than he ever was when we were battling him, and that makes sense.
When he was alive.
Yeah, back when he was alive, and during that time he was obviously on the opposite side to our point of view character. But he like is a good leader of the community here. He actually does well.
No, exactly. And I think, like, we always knew there must have been some quality here, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to be the police chief and all that.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, he, there's the bit where we've already touched on where he forces Alistair to, like, try and forgive Ainsley and stuff, and it's all like, yeah, I was all just like, go Laird, you're killing it. Good job.
Yeah, and it's clear that everybody there, including Alistair, respects him a lot, right? Yeah. So again, Alistair's a real smartass. He drops this dope line about, I thought you said school was important. It's like 10 out of 10 banter. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great little early glimpse into how competent he is, because obviously we know he thinks he's competent at this point, but he kind of, let's face it, he kind of wins this little mini argument with Laird, and they just sort of move on to a different topic. So, being able to match words with Laird, Laird was always pretty good with the old words, so I think it's a good sign for Alistair.
Yeah, Alistair eventually reveals that, yes, he's putting in more time, but it's not for selfish or, negative reasons. He is helping the family, and also helping his position within the family.
Yeah, and we've already sort of touched on this, like this idea that he thinks it's just because he's the best person to lead the family.
Yeah.
That's how it helps the family, because putting him in charge is the best thing to do. But I quickly want to interject here and say, so much of this conversation is built around the timing of things, or like time-based references. A lot of them are actually kind of subtle, and it's not until you're looking for it you realize how full this entire chapter is of little time references. It's very fun.
Yeah.
But yes, to come back to the actual conversation, I think the interesting idea here is that Alistair's crux of his argument is, I want to be a full-time chronomancer. And it was only when he said that I sort of realized we've never seen that before.
Yeah.
And it's presumably because of this whole thing. You have to donate your time to be a chronomancer. So presumably you sort of need a day job because you need somewhere to pull time from.
Yes, you need to be living a life that is worth something, because otherwise your time isn't worth anything, right?
Yeah.
You know what
And
they
you
say,
can't...
time is money, Elliot, and etc. etc.
I mean, that's the metaphor of the Bahames in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so obviously, like, yeah, you can't give up your chronomancy time. I don't even know if that would work. So yeah, like you can't be a full-time chronomancer because you wouldn't have any valuable time to give. Unless, of course, you had a family of time cows who you could milk.
Yeah, you could drink their delicious time milk. Yeah. I'm. What full-time practitioners do we have? I mean, the Duchamps aren't, the Bahames aren't. Johannes is, and the Thorburns seem to be as well.
No, actually, I think Rose Senior worked as a lawyer, although I don't know what shape or form that took because I can't imagine her going into an office or anything. So,
Yeah.
Maybe she was even a practitioner-y lawyer or something.
Or she just said she was a lawyer, but she was actually just a practitioner.
Yeah, well, she would have had to have some truth behind it. Yeah, I'm not fully sure, but yeah, I mean, we definitely saw a lot of full timers over in Toronto.
Yeah.
I think maybe a couple of the Duchamps are sort of full time, in the world. Like, have we seen anything that would indicate Sandra isn't? I actually think she might be.
We haven't, but we also haven't seen anything to indicate that she is, right? Like,
No, that's fair.
Like, we have these beats of the younger Duchamps doing things like going to soccer training or ballet practice or, whatever it is. And that feels to me like the Duchamps are at least somewhat living their suburban life while Sandra is also running the family,
Yeah, but I don't know. I think going to school's different because they're not awoken, or you got to sort of get educated. But it's like and a full time practitioner can still like go to the gym and have hobbies and stuff like just like a full time worker.
Sure.
Like I'm not talking about it's your entire life. I just sort of mean it's the main thing, and I wouldn't be surprised to learn a lot of the Duchamps sort of fit that bill.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So basically, Alistair talks about this idea that he's had that as he puts in a lot of time, it basically leaves a bit of a vacuum in the school that means that he is drawing power from everyone else, including the Bahames, but also, the Thorburns, the Duchamps, whoever, meaning that he feels that he is taking their power to an extent, and while he can repay the power that he steals from Bahames, he won't repay the power that he steals from their enemies, which makes sense. And it's possible, right? Like, Laird seems to be like, yeah, could be. Like, he doesn't seem to come down on it one way or the other.
He doesn't explicitly confirm it, but the fact that he doesn't come to explicitly deconfirm it seems to suggest that Alistair's probably right.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea because I think the other implication he sort of puts into it is that by doing this, he sort of he exerts a bit of control over them. He takes something from them.
Yeah.
And if he's doing that on a small scale, lots of times there's this intrinsic power he would have over them, which sort of makes sense from the way we know spirits operate. If they'll start to understand that there's this relationship where Alistair takes things from them. And so that sort of that pattern is maybe being reinforced on some small scale and might tip the scales in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, I also like it as this idea, it's basically Alistair putting out his own time distortion radiation. Basically, it's another form of radiation in this story, just well hidden. So I like that. It fits into the world. So I'm leaning towards it being correct.
Yeah. I think the fact that Laird doesn't deny it means that it's probably true. And it also, I also quite like the idea that as he's building up connections to these other people, I feel like it will make his ability to predict them a lot stronger as well, which obviously becomes important as he has his implement, as he becomes more and more reliant on being able to predict these people, right?
Yeah, I mean, because that's sort of become his whole shtick.
Yeah.
So something we haven't touched on till now, obviously, is like we're setting Alistair up as such a great antagonist for Blake. Like, I think he's going to be around for at least an arc, like as a heavy sort of influence, because he just seems like this perfect antagonist to Blake. They have so much in common, but yet so much that's sort of different about each other. Like something that immediately jumped out to me reading all this was that sort of same natural talent for understanding the systems of this world. Like that's something that's really defined Blake, and we see Alistair kind of do the same thing.
Yeah.
A bit of a harsher one on Blake, but Alistair's obviously this kind of open and unabashed like manipulator and user of people. That's something Blake has struggled with on his end of things. Sort of or accidentally dragging people and manipulating them. So yeah, and just, you know, Alistair's so focused on, well, he's kind of reckless, but in such a different way to Blake. Blake just forgets about the future, whereas Alistair kind of gambles on the future. Yeah, I don't know. I think these two are gonna sort of both in text and symbolically play off each other so well. I'm actually really excited to see what I actually think might be a conflict more between these two than Rose and Blake for the next arc. Assuming we can get enough of Blake back for this to matter.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right. I think there are a lot of ways that they'll play off of each other, whether that's as traditional antagonists or whether it's as kind of ending up sort of on the same team through this engagement.
Well, I mean, that's what's great about so many of these sorts of antagonist roles like this is when you build a great antagonist who plays off or everything that the protagonist stands for, it's so easy for them to become aligned in other situations. And that's always the most fun. So you're right, that would be incredibly fun.
Yeah. So basically Laird approves enough of what Alistair is saying, his arrogance and his lust for power. He's a good little behemoth, and so Laird basically says, you're ready, it's time to step up your training. He's been being groomed this whole time as a potential next leader of the Behemoth family.
Yeah. And so again, like something that's come up in the Discord, and we haven't talked about it on here, but Pact is kind of undermining all of the tropes of like your classic young adult, like finding out magic is real urban fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
Like Harry Potter is obviously the sort of go-to example.
Yep.
Like I think one of my predictions early in the story was like, Arc 2 is going to be a domain, and 3 will be an implement, and 4 will be a familiar. So it's sort of an arc for each one of those.
Yeah.
Because I was still thinking that headspace of he's in the world of wizardry and he's going to level up as he goes.
Yeah, he's got to go to Diagon Alley and get himself a familiar, etc.
Yeah, and of course, I got it partially right. He did get a familiar a couple of arcs in, but now he's not even a human. So, I love how it's sort of undermined all of the sort of standards of that genre. But to compare Alistair and Blake again, Alistair's kind of had the opposite. He was already part of a wizarding family, and then he's sort of just so good at it. He's such a natural talent, and then later on, he's about to find out it's actually here. He finds out he's actually the chosen one. Like they're like, oh, we've predicted that you were going to be the best at everything, and it plays into those stereotypes. He's kind of had the opposite path to Blake, where he's just sort of naturally fallen into more and more power and kind of goodwill.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be really interesting. Again, I just can't wait to see these two play off each other.
Yeah, I love that comparison because you're right. Alistair does kind of play like the typical escapist fantasy magic kind of protagonist, and it's awesome. Blake is so not that. It's a very interesting way for them to bounce off of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So through this, Laird kind of reveals to Alistair what the Behemoths have been planning. Again, it still feels like there's unanswered questions here, but it feels like we're getting closer and closer, or at least we're reintroducing some of this stuff. Laird was untethered, as has Alistair been, and so they're kind of positioned to maybe do something when something happens, basically.
Yeah, I think we sort of knew they were untethered, but what we really learn here is how much Rose was still involved with both of them. And you're right, there's still questions, because there's this dynamic between Laird and Rose and Alistair where all of them kind of don't fully trust. It's like a classic practitioner alliance where
Yeah.
they're not all 100% on the same page, but they're like, okay, we're kind of mostly there, so we're going to keep playing nice, but there's these undertones of, they may not fully have my back when it comes down to it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's so it's like it's good because I feel like now we have enough that I don't have to worry about it as much and can continue enjoying the story as is and wait for the remaining pieces to be filled in.
Yeah. So the next step of Alistair's training is to get in access to the secret lessons. So Laird takes him to see Rose Senior, who basically does a scared straight on him.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I love how this opens with a description of her clothes because it immediately made me think of young Rose. Who it's like every time we see her, it gets pointed out that she's in her granny's clothes.
Yeah, and Alistair actually makes that same connection.
Yeah, exactly. It's meant to be preppiest for the end there, but like I just immediately jumped to it as I was like, because Alister sort of uses it to say, oh, she's a bit like aristocratic, and immediately I was just like, fuck, that's Rose Junior as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's and so I love that connection between the two of them is reinforced in this chapter and kind of explained a bit by Alistair as to what he thinks that means.
Yeah, this whole scene is awesome, right? Like, it's this combination of backstory revealing for kind of Alistair and a bit of Laird's history, world building about demons, seeing some examples of these demons, and it's all rolled into this one Rose Senior lesson. Like, it's awesome. And I have to say, apart from the first time we met her in the story back in 1.1, Rose Senior has consistently been one of my favorite characters.
She's just fascinating. Like, I think is my word for it. Because I won't say I like her, I won't say I hate her, but I do find her incredibly fun to read. And I agree. This whole scene is fantastic. As you said, it's got a bit of everything. I just loved it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. One more thing before we start talking about what happens in this scene. I just want to touch on, it really comes back to me here. Like, this point of view is such a different writing style. We touched on all the time puns that are in here, but also just all the subtle burns that Alistair makes inside his own mind, inside his, he never says out loud. The kind of banter, the random puns, like, it's its own different writing style and it really feels distinct and smug. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been the most impressive part of Wildbow's writing to me is how easily... Like, that was what I really fell in love with Worm. I think we probably talked about that in Media MD like 3 years ago now, was just how he easily steps into and out of so many viewpoints and they all feel so unique and authentic and, you're right, he does it here again. He just nails this sort of different tone and you really feel like this is Alistair's head that we're in.
Yeah, it's very distinct. So this secret lesson is Rose summoning 3 demons to basically freak the fuck out of Alistair and basically explaining to him why he's here, which mostly boils down to learning how to defend himself against these demons.
Yeah, well, I think presumably she did all 7. It's just we only needed to see the first 3.
Yeah. So my personal favorite demon is Morax, which is the second one, I think.
Yeah.
And it's because this one bit where Alistair feels Laird's hand on his shoulder and then hears Laird speak and it's kind of like, oh, that doesn't quite sit right, and turns and sees that this hand is not Laird's hand. And it's this awesome beat. And I'm so happy that this episode is coming out, the day after Halloween. It's so on point.
Yeah, you're right. It's fucking creepy. I love everything about this. And I mean, let's quickly talk about sort of what we see here because I find it fascinating. There was obviously, we have the first choir, and the first choir is the least interesting, as Padraig would say, because they're fairly straightforward. They cut and chop reality, and that's what this one does. Then, as you said, Morax is fun. So from the second choir, which is Chaos, and I remember this is the one I originally thought Barbatorum was in back when we first started talking about the choirs.
Yeah.
And I think I can sort of see now why it's like a bit different because, and obviously, there's going to be variance in how they act within the demons, but this Morax kind of comes in and sort of disables like the basic structure of things, particularly like light, but also sound and stuff. And the second day of creation, like we talked about, the second choir represented like destroying the basic concepts of like the order of the universe, like up and down and stuff. And I think that's sort of what Morax is interfering with on some level. It's pretty cool. Horrifying too.
Definitely.
And then we get a little third choir demon, who obviously now we know is Barb's cousin, brother, sister,
best friend.
Yeah, probably. But so I think it was called Zappin. And Zappin just sort of blasts everything and everyone with this like assault on the senses.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because the third choir is all about like a ruin. It's all about like taking. I think it's about sort of taking things that have grown or been established and kind of undercutting them. And so Zappin, I guess, is sort of assaulting sort of the sense of the structure of things. Like he sort of, in Alistair's mind, is sort of cracking apart everything a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. I'm struggling with words here, but I feel like this gives us some insight into how Barbatorum might work a bit. Like he's going to, if Barbatorum gets out, which I'm like 99% sure is happening, Barbatorum's going to start to like undermine all the structures that he can find, which will be interesting. Interesting for all our families and up and coming lords potential as we go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely interesting. I actually, once we start talking about the entirety of this arc, I have some interesting thoughts about loss of structure being one of the main themes of this arc already. So we can loop back around to that and see how we think it might tie into Barbatorum, who is, of course, Blake's dad. Anyway, so Rose and Eamon's plan seems to have been that they knew that the Jacob's Bell leadership struggle was going to happen relatively soon, and they were planning to capitalize on this to effect some kind of change. Hopefully a change for the better.
Yeah. I mean, I think even we've talked about how this seems like the best time to do something while the system is about to be established. So, I mean, it makes sense that they'd think of it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I kind of... I feel like we criticize Blake a fair amount for calling something a plan when that plan is actually just kind of a loose jumble of ideas that he blusters his way through until it, in hindsight, seems like he knew what he was doing. And that kind of feels like what Granny Rose is doing here, right? Like, it feels like they're, instead of making a concrete plan, they're just kind of like, okay, here's maybe an opportunity, so let's just set up a bunch of tools and give them a push and hope that something goes right. It's not really a plan.
I actually don't think that that's fair. I think Granny Rose isn't in a position to do better.
Sure.
Like she's put thought into this. She's trying to be careful because I think she doesn't think she's equipped to be the one to bring about the change. Is sort of the impression she gives off here.
Yeah.
And I think there's sorts of reasons for that we can go into, but I agree that all she's really trying to do is set up dominoes in like the best places she sort of can, and kind of hope that her heir is going to knock them down as well as they can.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. I think she's put a lot of thought into doing that and how she's doing it, and I don't really understand what else she's meant to do. So I kind of think she's doing her best. Like Blake's shitness at making plans is because he runs in before he's fully formed them, whereas at least Rose Senior is just kind of saying, okay, my plan is to just have some dominoes to tip over. If anything, Blake is the embodiment of that plan.
Yeah, true. He's the dominoes. Yeah, maybe that's fair. It just feels not very tangible, Like, when we had that interlude with Eamon and Rose, coming out of that, I felt like, okay, there's some grand machination that's happening here. But it really actually feels like, more realistically, I suppose, what they're just trying to do is set up the conditions for someone else to be able to put together a plan.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I think that's a pretty good first step. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think they're in a position to do any better. So it's like Rose and Laird sort of talk about here. They've got this spinning top, and they're basically just sort of setting things up. So when it's more, what's the word? When it's more like likely, no, when it's more able to be influenced by a small nudge, things are in the best position to nudge it. And I think really that probably is the best play.
Yeah.
They're preparing the right time to strike.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But anyway, I want to get into what I consider the real meat of this chapter, which is all this juicy new lore that we get. I mean, really, I think the big one for me is this idea that Rose thinks that all others come from demons, or they come from practitioners, who she says come from others and therefore demons. Basically, everything can be traced back to demons.
Yep.
It's a very diabolist way of viewing the universe. It's pretty great. I mean, I even love the little bit where she's like, the practice comes from demons. It's just so hilarious because, you know, we've talked about like the witch hunting trials and stuff. And, you know, back then it was always, witchcraft deals with the devil. Turns out they might have been right. Which is just like a hilarious little bit that I kind of feel like I should have joked about already.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I just want to talk about this because it's such a huge implication. Like, I think Solomon, we know, started the Seal of Solomon. I believe that's when like practitioning started.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because I can't remember if it was just out of like, or, you know, in sort of the real world, or whether it was also established in Pact that Solomon dealt a lot with demons. Like we talked about how there was like there was like that demon Pokedex that was affiliated with Solomon.
Yep.
I can't remember if he was directly tied to demons in story, but this idea that maybe the Seal of Solomon is like some sort of long con by demons.
Yeah, to take this kind of metatextually, I think... Sorry, this isn't directly responding to what you're saying about the long con. I will get back to that in a second, but...
Sure.
To take the idea of demons being the originators metatextual, I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of supernatural stuff started out as being very heavily intertwined with religion, and only as religion has faded has supernatural things moved away from it, right? And so through that lens, I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of supernatural things do come from demons, or maybe angels, but obviously, depending on your religion, those two are one and the same.
Yeah, well, no, I like this idea that like she's basically blaming the demons for creating the current situation. Like she's basically saying a lot of the current world has been shaped as much by the demons as the creators. You know, the destroyers are creating as much in their own way. And I think that's because, like, I think when Faisal first started to talk about the Abyss as a force for change rather than, like, evil, I compared it to the demons, and you said that was unfair, but I'm kind of double downing on it here. Like, if we sort of think about, like, the beginning of the universe in Pact, if it was all chaos, like, even worse than the Abyss, and meaning started to form, I think what would have happened, like, similar to evolution in real life, you know, meanings that self-reinforced would have been the ones that propagate, because they're the ones that propagate. It's sort of a weird mix of definition. And angels might sort of be this manifestation of the way these systems reinforce themselves. But the thing is when you're doing stuff like that, you can sort of get stuck in like a oh god, I'm going too deep into programmer talk here. I think I don't know how else to describe it. You get stuck in like a local maximum.
Yeah.
And you know, you start to reinforce things that aren't necessarily ideal. And I think demons here can represent like change and evolution. Like they introduce stress and they sort of poke at the system, and that's how you can facilitate change, like whether it's for better or for worse. And I mean, obviously, I think Black Lamb's Blood was all about how basically if you try to use them for good, it's probably not going to work. So they're not a great tool for it. I'm not claiming that they should be used for good, because it seems like in general they're pretty fucking awful. But I guess what else have we got? I mean, there's the Abyss, which kind of overlaps, I think, conceptually with them.
Yeah.
But you know, both of these things are sort of designed to put pressure on the system to force change of some kind.
I feel that, but it does seem that demons, at least as we understand them, aren't just about change. They're about change for the worse, specifically. I think the Abyss is conceptually a bit closer to the idea of change for change's sake. But even that feels still slanted quite negative. Maybe it is just that from our human perspective, any change is kind of negative. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think I think you're right. I do think that the nature of demons is to say destroy or undermine or bring instability. It's in the same way that angels are too far the extreme on the other way. They just want to sort of stagnate things, I reckon.
Yeah.
So you sort of got this yin and yang thing where if you let one have too much power, it's not good. You want a balance of these things, I think. I guess. Yeah, I don't know, because I think you're right, probably. I think demons do seem to represent lowering things, sort of stripping away the meaning and the power. But again, I think maybe that is just your way to, as Granny Rose says, you can use that stuff, and that's effectively what Blake is. He's been created by this, so is Rose. You can use those to tip the scales and put things off balance. That makes it easier to nudge it in the direction that you actually want things to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
But yeah, so to bring it back, because this has turned into a very long rant.
Yeah.
I think sort of the Seal of Solomon stuff I was saying about how I feel like it might be a long con, because it feels like on the surface it seems like something that is designed for good. You can't lie, and it empowers the humans to stop being tortured and everything. And so it seems good, but we've pretty much seen in this story that actually it's kind of not. Practitioners are not usually making things better. We even had speeches about how the humans are winning now. But from everything we've seen, this isn't necessarily considered to be a good thing.
Yeah. I think that's right, but I think I'm fully on board with Team Break the System, but I don't think that means that the system was set up to be bad in this way. It's kind of like, I mean, I feel like I do this all the time, but let's take this to a kind of capitalist structure analogy, right? Communities banding together to help each other. So, I'm the farmer, I'll produce food, and you can be the blacksmith, you produce tools. And that means I don't have to worry about producing tools. I'll just trade you my food for your tools, right? That's a system that on that micro scale works pretty well. But the reason that it has so many problems is it's been expanded to a huge extent to now be a global macro problem, right? And I kind of feel the same way probably about the Seal of Solomon, where it's like it was set up with good intentions, but it's just the implications of those intentions when you multiply it out to a big global, playing field and billions of people, you just can't consider all of the ramifications of what that system will actually lead to. I think that's where we're at.
I actually mostly agree with you, except I think I'm giving more credit to the demons that may have helped instigate this with Solomon, because I fully agree. I think this is a system that is designed to appear to be good, and I think this reflects capitalism in that I agree that it's not that everything about capitalism is inherently flawed, but it's sort of when you take it to its extreme and expand it and it becomes everything, then it's terrible, and I think that's what's happening here,
right? Just the demons were able to foresee those consequences where the humans weren't.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not. I mean, this is maybe a bit tinfoily, but I think it's possible.
Okay, I can see that.
I don't know. And it brings me back to I was thinking about Johannes and Faisal and I think maybe they sort of again, I think they maybe agree with Rose and Blake a bit on this, and they've just got a very different fix. I'm wondering if their plan is to just try and stop the swinging of the spinning top, so to speak, by force. I keep coming back to Johannes's Pied Piper shtick, and I have a feeling maybe their plan is to sort of bring Johannes's Wonderland out of the domain and sort of through force try and get things to just calm down.
Revert the Seal of Solomon?
No, not quite, but to lessen the sort of impact of practitioners by making everyone kind of I think he wants to take away free will type thing, basically. I don't know. I'm kind of stealing the plot for season 4 of Angel, I think. But that's sort of what I'm picturing, is this idea that Faisal and Johannes might be trying to create a world where it's if they take away everyone's sort of free will or something, it'll just everything will be calmer and more ordered. I don't know. It's kind of because I think the domain that Johannes has set up is this embodiment of the good old days for others when they could just go nuts. And so I think, that's sort of like he just wants to push things further in that direction.
Yeah. Okay.
And he stands as this lone practitioner. I think that's maybe because he thinks practitioners are bad too, and he's one of those people who's like, I have to work in the dark to serve the light type thing. He wants to be the last practitioner type thing.
Yeah, which feels kind of reminiscent of like the Black Lamb's Blood author, for example, trying to end the concept of diabolism as we know it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
But anyway, I guess I don't know. I think maybe Granny Rose and Eamon were sort of trying something different, like as we sort of, as they said, or Laird and Rose say, they want to like wait till the spinning top is sort of tipped over, and then try and push it in the direction they want it to go. And I think maybe what they're hoping is for a system that rewards the greedy less. I mean, I hope that's what they're going for. That's what I would like to see. Basically you want a situation where you can reward someone who isn't greedy, who's willing to make sacrifices for others, who's currently stuck in a tree.
Someone self-sacrificing, huh? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, the more I read this interlude, the more I think that like Blake is actually the intended heir.
Interesting.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. But yeah, like I like this idea of Blake representing a system that's less about self-greed. And if we can get him back, maybe we'll find out.
If we ever see Blake again instead of Spooky Tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This actually, it's interesting. We started talking about this discussion question that we started last week of how would you change the system? And then this basically comes along to spark more of those ideas.
Yeah, I basically just rambled for 15 minutes on my answer to the discussion question, I guess.
Yes, we'll touch on that again later. Yeah, so we jump forward and we're back in the modern day, and actually very modern day, because Alistair is visiting Rose in her psychiatric hospital, I suppose, and he comes up with the craziest plan we've seen yet. So it's lucky that he's in the psychiatric hospital, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is another wonderful cut. Like, we've already sort of talked about it. But this chapter, perhaps more than our episode, has had a fantastic flow.
Yeah.
Just the way it is sort of nudged from scene to scene and really kept the momentum of what it's doing.
Yeah.
It covers so much ground, but it never feels like it's jumping. I think that this, especially on a technical level, might be my favorite interlude yet. But I feel like I say that every interlude now, so... Could be recency bias.
Yeah.
Or they're just getting better.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This one actually felt short. I don't know how short it was, but it felt quite short to me. Even though there was so much in it, it was dense, but felt. I don't know. One of the interesting things about this last bit, though, is it really, and this is touching on what you're saying about the flow. Like it's a little confusing for a moment about whether we're in the modern day, because we refer to Rose, and it feels like it's intentionally contrasting Rose Senior to Rose Junior, right? Even to the point that Alistair points out that these clothes are very similar to the ones that the old woman had worn the first time he'd seen her, which is the scene we just saw, right?
Yeah.
It's an awesome intentional comparison here. And I wonder what the point of this comparison is. Is it just to show that Rose has gotten to the point where she is as intimidating as Rose Senior was?
Yeah, I mean, she's got some conquest energy to help her. I actually think this is a little bit why I'm pushing more and more in the direction of Blake being the end game, because Rose takes after her grandma, and it's another line that's drawn here. And we basically just had a whole scene that was talking about how Rose Senior didn't really think she was the one to do this.
Right.
So now we've ended up with an heir. Like, yeah, I mean, we talked about how Rose resembles her in a lot of ways, and it's like maybe that's the point. She wanted Barbatorum to cut up somebody who's not like that's kind of the opposite of her, because that's the person who should do this. I mean, that's an interesting new idea.
I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me, because Rose Senior feels arrogant enough that she thinks if she had been set up by her grandmother to be in this situation, she would have been the one to make the change.
Oh yeah, well I don't think she's made it easy for Blake. That's fucking clear.
Yeah, sure.
But no, I don't know. I think I don't know. I give her more credit than that. I think she's definitely she had an arrogant streak in her, but I think she's quite intelligent. And
Yeah.
if she seemed to be coming at this from a place of I'm not the one to do this.
Yeah.
So it then seems weird to create a
clone of yourself.
who reminds everyone so much of her and expect them to be the one to do it.
Yeah. Interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but I like it as a little bit of foreshadowing, possibly. Yeah, it's interesting. So Alistair proposes to Rose, obviously, and it makes me very happy that Rose had no idea that this was coming. Like Rose is lying in this hospital bed, basically expecting somebody to come and fight her or bargain with her, right?
Yeah.
And Alistair walks in and proposes to her.
I mean, it even cracks through her facade of conquest a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is great because then Alistair gets to be smug about it as well. These two were kind of made for each other, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good pairing, huh?
I've talked so much about how I can't wait to see how Blake and Alistair play off each other, but I'm just as excited to see how Rose and Alistair go as a couple. It's either going to be like frustratingly fantastic, how well they play off each other, or it's just going to be a complete train wreck, and I'm down for either one of those two options.
Yeah. Anything could happen, right?
Yeah. Also, she was relieved to hear that the others are all okay, which was nice.
Yeah.
She's not a complete monster. She does seem to care about them a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. Does Alistair, how does he know that? They went to the fucking abyss. What are you talking about, Alistair? You just bullshitting.
That's not mostly okay.
Yeah.
I don't think. I don't know. Maybe the Bahams have come and picked them up. I mean, we haven't seen them since Blake and friends just fucked off to go start fires.
True.
The Bahams might have come and saved them if Alistair already had this in motion.
Yeah, and I guess Alistair isn't including Blake in the people that he thinks Rose cares about if they're okay.
Yeah. I think Blake might have been the mostly in the okay. I don't know.
Yeah. So I want to touch on whether this was planned, right? Whether this Baham and Thorburn partnership through marriage was planned. Not specifically Alistair, but, and not specifically Rose, I suppose, but something like this. Because Granny Rose did explicitly say in her letter, get married, find yourself a man to marry, right?
Yeah. And
it feels weird that she would have put that knowing that the Jacob's Bell Lordship contest is coming, stuff like that. That means that which you would normally think of as a more long-term thing has to be done basically immediately to have any relevance, right? It has to be done within a month of the heir finding that letter, more or less. So it feels to me that this was planned to some extent by Granny Rose.
Yes, well, and obviously the transition we get, the cut that I've already brought up is, it goes straight from Alistair sort of being like, but what nudge could I give? And then it's like, we get a cut and it starts talking about Rose, and it's like, okay. So I do feel like we're meant to take an implication from that the Alistair knew this was coming.
Yeah.
I think I've said before, I'd be a little disappointed if it turned out like everything we're seeing here was predicted before Granny Rose died. Like, I don't know. I feel like it would take away from the journey a bit if Granny Rose knew that things were going to end up exactly here. Like, again, I prefer our idea of she was just laying out dominoes. Yeah. And Alistair's just doing his best to fall as intended, basically.
I think even if this was 100% planned, I think that only applies up until the point where Blake dies. Because I still feel like Blake was meant to die. The thing about Blake is that he's fucking unpredictable, right? and that's what makes him a threat to the Bahams. That's what makes him a threat to Alistair, because Alistair is all about predicting people, right? And so it feels to me that, maybe Alistair and Rose were meant to get married, but Blake is the wild card in this scenario. Blake is the one that is unpredictable enough that he can fuck up any plans that they may have made.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't feel I don't like the idea that they knew that the marriage would be happening or the engagement would happen under these circumstances.
Yeah, sure.
These circumstances are crazy. I think they may have pictured something very different.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean that's an interesting turn of fate. If Alistair's the one kind of going ahead with the plan and following the plan, despite the fact that the plan's probably already gone off the rails. Like, I like that as a bit of a reversal of what he was carrying on about at the start of the chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love how this chapter ends as well with this note of, well, things are going to get worse before they get better, which I think is code for Barbatorum's getting free, because I don't know how much worse they could get without like a demon being introduced to the mix. But it just reminded me of in the vision we had where Rose in like 12.5, where we learnt about the whole Barbatorum cutting people up thing. It made me realize if Barbatorum gets out, he can just start doing that more and more, can't he? Like, are we going to have fucking vestige civil wars going on all over the place? Because, like we talked about this concept of like the Choir of Ruin destroying structures and things, and the families in this town are the most ingrained structures you could probably find. So, creating civil wars between the Duchamps and the Baheims, and I don't know what you could do with Johanna's, but like that seems like the most shit Barbatorum could get up to, and it'd be so funny to see a bunch more Blake and Rose couples type deal walking around.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Rose even said in that vision that there's nothing to stop Barbatorum giving them another cut up when he's done. So, I mean, God, imagine if like Rose got cut up again. I don't think he's going to cut up Blake again. There's not much to separate.
Yeah, there's nothing left.
But like, it'd be morbidly hilarious if we saw Rose get split again. I have no idea what that would look like, but I'm kind of like curious.
Yeah.
Like, I feel terrible for saying it, but I'm kind of curious to see what that would look like.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll find out. But that's not this arc, though, because that's the end of this chapter and this arc Duress. Before we wrap up on this arc, a quick note that we're currently running a discussion question, which is, I guess you put it most eloquently by saying, what should be the system version 1.1? What changes would you make to the system? Would you break it and start with something completely new? Would you tweak it? Let us know.
Yeah, I think what sort of reasonable changes do you think someone could make without spending years setting up a whole demon conspiracy, time chronomancer conspiracy, whatever the fuck Rose Senior and Eamon have done thing? Yeah.
But let's talk about duress. The definition of duress, Elliot, I think you hear it most in the phrase under duress, as in you are doing something under duress, you're forced to do something under duress, which means something that you do because you are forced to do it either by threats or by, violence or something else.
Yeah, basically. And I feel like there was a lot of that because there were a lot of people basically under constant pressure this arc. I mean, everything that happened in the house was basically under duress, like Operation Drain Drop was not something that they did because they felt like it.
You know the person who was the most under duress?
Blake, probably.
In my opinion, this arc, Ava. Ava is the person who was the most explicitly under duress this arc, which I like because that was by the hands of our, goodies.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's technically more blackmail or extortion or something, but but I think no, you're right. Blackmailing or extorting someone means that everything they did was under duress.
Yeah, that's just another type of coercion, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think Blake was kind of like I don't think he's realized it, but I'd say that the Abyss is kind of everything he's done here has kind of been under duress from the Abyss.
Yeah.
Because I don't think much of what we've seen this arc has been Blakey, or at least in the second half.
Yeah, but the thing about Blake is that he kind of, I don't know, maybe this is a bit unfair, but he kind of feels like he puts himself under duress to act a certain way, right? Like he gets into his head like, I have to do this thing, I have to sacrifice myself in this way, and this way, and this way, or else this thing's going to happen, that thing's going to happen. And some of that is true, I think, but some of that is him, forcing himself to have to sacrifice himself in order to help his friends do whatever he's trying to do.
No, that's kind of fair. There was not as much resistance as I would have liked in some of this.
Yeah. I think other under duress folks, Alistair put Rose under duress by threatening her friends and family in order to coerce a positive response to his proposal. That's the message of this arc, is send a clockwork goblin after your girlfriend's family and she'll have to say yes.
Well, no, not even your girlfriend.
Sorry, yeah, just that girl that you've met once or twice, and that you don't even like.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then the other meaning of duress is sort of to do with being forcibly restrained or imprisoned. It's like it's an archaic use of the term, according to the Googles. But I mean, obviously I think this sort of applies to the situation that was this arc, because they were locked in the house, then they were locked in the upper floors, then they were locked in just the library.
Yeah.
Then they got locked in the abyss, and now Blake is locked in a shit boogeyman body.
Yeah.
So, just kept getting more and more restrained and imprisoned in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally becomes free. Yay.
When? Did I miss a chapter?
No, he's now free and happy in his other form, and he's going to go around being free to do whatever the fuck he wants, which is mostly murder bames.
Well, I don't think he's free to do that based on
true,
how 12.8 ended, but yeah.
So let's talk about the themes of this arc. I think one that we touched on the most throughout this arc was the concept of humanity, and Blake's struggles to retain his humanity that he ultimately did not do.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this a lot in 10 and 11 as well. Basically, since he's gotten out of the drains, this has been something he's been tackling, and you're right, we sort of saw him finally lose this struggle right at the end here, so I can't wait to see where we go with this next arc, hopefully upwards, because I don't feel like there's any further down to go.
Yeah.
And I mean, something that sort of jumped out to me as a bit of a theme here was this idea of like, what does good and bad mean in this world? Like Blake has sort of had this descent where he's lost his ability to discern what's good, in my opinion, or he's at least very much changed it.
Yeah.
And then obviously we sort of met the Thorburns a lot more this arc, and have sort of understood the, however small it is, good side to their relationships to each other.
Yeah.
And their dynamics. And then obviously, we've got Alister and his whole smug bullshit chosen one stuff where, he thinks he's doing good for everyone, but I think we could all pretty much assume he's not.
Yeah. I feel like we also have kind of explicitly now set up the trio, as you refer to them, the Trey Horny others, Evan, Blake, and Green Eyes, and specifically Blake as kind of caught in the middle between good and bad, as kind of represented, mostly good represented by Evan feels fair, but bad represented by Green Eyes doesn't quite feel fair, but maybe just like Green Eyes as the next step down Blake's slide into being a full-on monster.
I think it's fair to say she represents the appeal of the abyss.
Yeah.
Like she's very abyssy.
Yeah, I think she's as close to being a bad character as we could have for her to still be on Team Blake. Like for Blake to still be comfortable with her around.
She's like a functioning abyss person, basically. Like she represents giving in and finding a balance there, maybe.
Yeah. So I quite like that as a kind of twist on the, the angel and the devil on his shoulder kind of trope.
Yeah.
The other thing that I kind of alluded to before that I'm kind of interested by about this arc is it really, like the idea of it changing the structures that we kind of had established in the story so far. Obviously the house is now completely out of play. So that's a literal structure that has been lost. But the core kind of tenets of this chapter have been of this story have been Blake's connection to his cabal, to Alexis and Ty and Tiff, and that has been completely warped by this chapter.
Yep.
Rose's connection to Blake has been completely lost, I would say. The Behames have been the primary antagonists for most of this story, and this chapter, specifically these two chapters, I would say, have completely twisted that. The only remaining structure that we had from before is Blake, Green Eyes, Evan as the kind of power trio, right?
Yeah. So you've just set me off on this weird thought tangent, because like everything you're sort of saying reminds me of like how I might describe, I don't know, maybe the third choir of demons and what they would do to the story.
Well, exactly.
Now I'm trying to piece together if there's like this thing where like, the last 7 arcs are going to each represent one of the choirs or something. I'll come back with this. I'll look into it and see if there's anything I can,
maybe. I'm not
sticky
gonna
tape
say,
together there.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that doesn't exist, but the thing I would take from that is Barbatorum is Blake's dad, and this is the arc where Blake has the most embraced his other side, which comes from Barbatorum, right?
Yeah.
The connection there is that he has either intentionally or unintentionally ruined his structures, ruined the structures in his life, and that is what happens when he leans into his other side. He leans more into the side that comes from the third choir of demons, and therefore this is what happens. Like, it just all gets warped. It all gets lost.
Mm-hmm. And soon Barbatorum's going to come down to give him a big high five for it.
He's going to be like, good work, my son. Yeah. So that's my read on Duress, I would say.
Yeah, I like it.
That brings us to the end of this arc, this chapter, and this episode. So thanks for joining us. If you want to leave your thoughts on this arc, this chapter, or this episode, or even this discussion question, again, how would you patch the system 1.1? The best place to do that is in our discussion threads, which you can find linked in the description of this very here episode here.
Yeah, and if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and you haven't left a review, why not do that? That really helps us out. It feeds the algorithm, and then the algorithm likes us more and propagates us in ways we don't quite understand. And if you're not listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, if you have an account, you could just head over there and review us anyway. We won't mind.
Yeah, I won't tell if you don't. If you liked all the terrible puns in this episode, then the place for you to go is our Twitter, which is @MediaMDPodcast. Because each time we post a new episode, we have a tradition of writing a stupid pun about something in the chapter that we're discussing. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they're always stupid. So if you want that, check out @MediaMDPodcast.
Yes, and of course, doofmedia.com is the place where you can find out not just more about Deep Impact, but all the other shows on the Doof Media network. There's Media MD, which is another show that I think is all right.
Yeah, it actually, the new Media MD episode just came out yesterday on Halloween. We did a very spooky thing where instead of talking about one movie, we talked about 2 movies. We talked about the 2 Jordan Peele horror films. So if you're interested in hearing our thoughts on that, check out Media MD over on doofmedia.com.
Yes, and if you enjoy that episode, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoy any Doof episodes, patreon.com/doofmedia, you can go there and you can prove it. And, obviously you get a bunch of rewards for it. You're not just doing it for free. So go check it out and see what you can get.
Yep. If you want to be rewarded with more great stories just like this here packed here, then you should head on over to patreon.com/wildbow, where you can support Wildbow's authoring directly.
Yeah. And so apart from that, we'll see everyone on Monday, the 4th of November for Execution 13.1.
Not at all a foreboding arc title.
Because they're going to execute the plan and fix everything.
I'm sure that's what it is. I'm sure that's it. Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.